He was scared. His father was in jail, the family business had gone bankrupt, so he had to leave the only home he ever knew and move 80 miles away to a big, confusing new city. But 4-year-old Frederick didn't understand any of this. All he knew was that the grown-ups were saying he had to get a job and start working. He was supposed to protect farmers' crops by running around in the scorching sun, chasing away birds. If he did this all day, every day, he got paid 6 pence per week. In the coming years, this frightened, dirt-poor child would grow up to create one of the best and most famous car companies in the world. His company built such powerful car engines that during World War I, the British government made a special request for them to make airplane engines. Who is this kid? What's the name of the car he built? If he was broke and didn't have resources, how did he build such amazing cars? His name is Frederick Henry Royce, and he would one day build the Rolls-Royce, the most luxurious car in the world. This car was so smooth and silent that it unnerved customers, so engineers had to add artificial noises to the engine just to comfort them. But did you know that the Rolls-Royce came extremely close to never being built? The problem was its inventor, Frederick Henry Royce. He was uneducated and dirt poor. Frederick didn't know the first thing about engines, let alone understand the subtleties of mechanics and engineering. But that was about to change. Frederick's dad eventually got out of jail and put him there instead. I mean school. He put Frederick in school. The boy enjoyed learning and was particularly good at math, but he'd only gone to school for a year when his father suddenly died. This 1 year of schooling was the only formal education he'd ever get in his life. He was broke all over again. So he quit school and got a job selling newspapers. He became a paperboy. He was only 9 years old. Frederick was rescued from selling newspapers by his aunt, who paid for him to apprentice at the Great Northern Railway Company. He was an avid learner and pounced on every opportunity to learn something new. His time at the railway company gave him a foundation in engineering and mechanics, but bad luck struck again. Before he could learn all that he needed, the money his aunt had given him ran out, so he had to leave the apprenticeship. It was the second time in his short life that he'd been robbed of a chance to learn something useful and get valuable skills. This experience scarred him forever. He hated being poor and became obsessed with working hard to escape his miserable life. His obsession would ultimately grow so out of control that he was still working, sketching new designs, when he was sick and on his deathbed just a few hours before passing away. After losing his apprenticeship, Frederick realized that getting a formal education was not an option for him. So he got a job at the electric light and power company in London. The best way for him to learn was on the job and by teaching himself. He was interested in building stuff, so he taught himself engineering and algebra. After a few years at the new job, Frederick felt confident, so he partnered with his friend Ernest Claremont and they went into business for themselves. They launched F.H. Royce & Company, a business that made doorbells, dynamos, and electric cranes. He was now 22 years old. This was the turning point in young Frederick's life. The business did well, and for the next few years, life was steady. Well, except for the fact that he got married, didn't have any kids, and got divorced. And then the United States and Germany started building better and cheaper electric cranes, so his company had fierce competition, and he was worried about keeping the company alive. So yeah, fairly smooth. Then something interesting happened. Frederick Henry Royce bought his first car, but he didn't like it, so he tinkered with it and improved it. But it still didn't meet his high standards. So, in 1904, in a tiny little corner of the company workshop, he built his first car. He liked it, and secretly thought that it was much better than the car he'd bought and fixed. So he built 2 more cars. He was 41 years old. Frederick gifted one of the cars to his friend and business partner who had helped him launch his business nearly 20 years ago. The other one he sold to a man named Henry Edmunds, who was one of the investors in their company. Henry Edmunds was so impressed with the car that he put Frederick in touch with a rich businessman named Charles Stuart Rolls. You see where this is going. Charles Rolls and Frederick Royce. Frederick was about to solve his second problem, getting lots of money and resources. Charles Rolls was super rich, super young, and super interested in cars. He and Frederick couldn't have been more different. When they first met, Frederick Royce was 41. Charles Rolls was 26. Frederick had no formal schooling. Charles was educated at Cambridge. Young Charlie was so rich that when he was 18, his parents let him travel to France, buy a car, and drive it back to Cambridge. He was the only person on campus who had a car. Most people didn't even know what a car was. Since young Charlie loved cars, after he graduated, his dad gave him a ton of money to open a car dealership in London. It was the first and only car dealership in the city. When young boy Charlie and old man Freddie were first introduced, Charles had just opened his car dealership and Frederick had just built his first car. Charles took a test drive on the Royce 10 and was so wildly impressed that he agreed on the spot to sell as many Royce cars as Frederick could make. And for the next 2 years, that's exactly what he did. In 1906, they formalized their partnership under the Rolls-Royce brand with the launch of the Silver Ghost. At the time, it was promoted as the best car in the world. By 1907, the company was winning awards for the engineering and reliability of its cars. Rolls-Royce was blowing away the competition, and it seemed like the sky was the limit. But then a series of tragedies struck, one after the other, like falling dominoes. Charles Rolls, the Rolls in Rolls-Royce, died in a plane crash. The partnership ended, and Frederick was left on his own. Just as he was picking himself up and putting himself together, he was given more horrible news. He was sick. His unhealthy working hours and bad nutrition had finally caught up with him. He had a major operation in London and was only given a few months to live by doctors. He didn't care and threw himself into work. The months would prove to be years, and Rolls-Royce would end up building airplane engines for the British government, buying out his rival, the world-famous Bentley, and being awarded a baronet for his services to British aviation. But the only thing that mattered to Frederick was his work. He cared for nothing else. The night before he died, he sat up in bed, deathly sick, and drew a sketch on the back of an envelope. The sketch was a design improvement for the Bentley, the rival company that he just bought. He gave the envelope to his housekeeper and told her to make sure that the boys in the factory got it safely. He died before his sketch reached the factory. He'd lived his whole life by the motto, "Whatever is rightly done, however humble, is noble." If you enjoyed that, please subscribe. It would really help us.